So I invited Frank and his significant other up to the house tonight. There's been so much this week, as you guys have all heard, and I cannot tell you how many people have reached out to me to say, how do you know Frank? Is he trustworthy? Is he sane? What's his background? And then, all of these things. So just to back up, the first time Frank came to stand on a corner in Concord, he was Frank, and I was like, who is this guy? And I remember saying, Frank, we're not losing this corner. You need to simmer down and go sit with my boys. And he did. He went and he sat with Max for a while, and he understood that the corner was really important to me. And then David, who many of you know, is the young man in Lebanon that did the 30-day vigil, a godly man with a wife who's going to nursing school and is pregnant. And David said he has a story, and he is trustworthy, and he is just in this fight because he knows what the cost of freedom really feels like when it's lost. And over the last 7 to 8 weeks since I met you the first time, I've gotten little snippets of Frank's story. And many of you know that I have been very passionate about kids that get caught in the system, age out of the system. Did a big thing for the kids that were at the Sununu Center. And I didn't know this till tonight, but I hope, Frank, you don't mind me sharing this much. But he actually was a child that ended up at the Sununu Center at
one point. It was YDC at that time.
YDC at that time. And was caught up in the system really from like 13 all the way till he was, 32? You shared with me?
35 is when I got
35 when he finally broke free. And so he has seen where many of you aren't aware, but I've heard so many kids that have aged out or gotten caught up in that there is sex trafficking, there is rape, there is abuse, there is hostility. These kids go through.
Who's going to believe a juvenile delinquent saying that my oppressors just beat me and raped me? Nobody's going to believe you. That's what they tell you when you're in YDC. Nobody's going to believe you. And then they continue to do it because they're in control of all the documentation of what happens. And nobody's going to believe a juvenile delinquent.
So I have, many of you know, have had so many conversations with kids that have, and people who have worked with these kids for years. So that was my story, right? And how God makes paths cross. But I remember one time when I looked at Frank, I said, trauma-based relationship intervention. He is in fight or flight, and he is passionate because there's something there in his story, like we talked about tonight before we started this, that if I walk through the woods and I get attacked by a bear, the next time I go through the woods, I'm going to have a very heightened awareness of whether there's a bear coming at me, right? He has a very heightened awareness of what corruption can be like within the system. He fought hard to break free from a situation that he was a child that he entered into, an innocent child entered into this, and clawed his way out of it. And I've got to tell you, the kids that make it through that come out with a strength that is phenomenal if they survive it. And now what does Frank do for work? He actually rehabilitates individuals that make it out of the system, and he has a huge success story with that. He has dedicated his life to mental health crisis unit team in Manchester. He's done just so many pieces of really good work. He's never been arrested for any sort of violent crime. He actually had unjustly been put in solitary confinement where he was not allowed to leave. In a certain number of days, you're supposed to have sunlight. He was unjustly put there, and then he wasn't given his time out of there. He actually at one point was able to go and represent himself and won the legal case that he was unjustly treated.
I was held in solitary confinement for 2.5 years for refusing to shave my beard on religious grounds. I represented myself pro se in federal court. I dragged in the warden, the major, the parole board members, right? And had a 2-day trial, and I won. I won my release. And even after I won my release, They had to wait for me to have a place to go. And in the interim, I was sprayed on July 25th for 10 seconds. I have the video. For 10 seconds with a Bear pepper spray can, or a crowd control can, whatever you want to call it, ballistic OC spray, sprayed me because I was sleeping naked because it was so hot in this concrete box. They sprayed me for 10 seconds and then left me there, which is not the policy. The policy is not to use chemical warfare in a closed location. The policy is to suit up the officers, open the door, shoot you with the taser, subdue you, and move you on. Not to spray you and leave you there for hours to fester in OC.
So, Frank's story, I have so many. I remember a child named Seth. Frank actually was at the detention center with one of the individuals who was just in the paper who's bringing up charges of the sexual abuse. But I mean, Seth's leg was broken 3 times, and you know, I could just go through the story and the horror of what this child went through and others that have aged out of the system. So these individuals, they come out and they know what it's like to not have freedom. And when they finally taste what freedom is like, and they see the potential of that slipping away from them, they're going to have that heightened awareness of, we've got to stop this. This has got to stop. So, you know, Frank has said, I will be the tip of the sword in this fight, and I'm okay if
I get broken off. Because I know what lies ahead for humanity if we don't stop this. And so he is getting up and he is standing to fight for his freedom fight with a lot more passion than someone who's never walked his story, right? And knowledge, because none of you even know anything about the Constitution or the law. Generally speaking, some of you do, but most of you have no clue. You just listen to what you're told.
So there's a lot of righteous anger here, okay? And Frank is a passionate freedom fighter, throw his life down for all of us to try and keep what's happening. His freedom fight is just as important as the 70-year-old that showed up last Friday night on the corner with her dove flag that she pulled out of her Christmas decorations to stand with us, who's never stood before, but knows that something is wrong. Her intuition is telling her something is not okay, and she wants to try and preserve the country that she grew up in. So you have this whole spectrum, and we really need everyone in between, okay?
We the people.
We the
all
people,
the people.
all have to come together. And now, certainly there's a lot of people that, you know, this legislation and let's do a lawsuit and let's
We
do
the
this.
people, not the politicians, not the political groups and organizations that are just trying to put these bills through. Come on now.
So the concern is that even, like I had someone come up today and say, I'll pay up to $2,000 to retain an attorney to do a cease and desist for an employee at Concord Hospital. But by the time we get an attorney, we file it, we get a judge, we get a court hearing date, we get in front of a judge that may not be corrupt. We have the Supreme Court not even look into the election, guys. So,
meanwhile, this person's starving to death, struggling. Where am I going to work? What am I going to do? How am I going to pay my bills?
So we're already really living in a lawless land. No one's following the Constitution. You know, we're under this emergency of a pandemic, so like all rules are broken because of that, as basically an excuse to kind of do everything the way the government decides to do it. And our Declaration of Independence and constitutional rights are just kind of not important right now. And then you have this money, you know, you have employees in their workplace that are, you'll get a bonus if you get the injection and you stay on board, and
And a donut.
And your donut, and you're getting coerced, and then at the same time the federal government is tempting the states with, hey, we'll give you this grant money, but hey, as soon as we say that you're unvaccinated, need to be tracked, and we'll go knocking on their door. I mean, who felt threatened on Wednesday? I have to say I did when I read that, because it was like, what, are they going to take me into
They can know where we
isolation?
live. They can know where we live, and all the things that are being injected into us or not injected into us.
And if
But
we don't comply,
if we don't comply, we'll be put in a FEMA camp. but we can't know where they live, but that's public record. We know where you live is public record, people.
But that probably did feel pretty...
They know where I live.
But
I feel threatened.
Right.
I feel threatened too.
And we know why now he feels threatened, right? Because we know his story. That bear jumped out and got him in the woods. He has a right to fear, The other thing is, when I walked in on Wednesday, as I waited to be one of the ones that met the capacity, we had to wait for someone to come out to go in, someone walks up behind me and she announces that she's a lobbyist for Dartmouth Hitchcock. And it suddenly hit to me that this person was there to get their hands on that $27 million. And how many people in that room were there for that money, right? And I'm new to the game. I don't know all the players. But I know this one has been tracking everything for a long time. And he knew the players. He knew every legislator in there. He knew everyone who had voted a certain way. He knows who's in with who. He knew who was there for lobby money. And him running around saying, just throw me in a FEMA camp, right? So you don't understand someone's freedom fight until you understand how precious their freedom is maybe to them, okay? And it's all going to look differently. I could be upset. Someone could be upset with me because I just joined the fight 2 months ago. And honestly, I should have been in the game years ago, right? We're all here because we were kind of sleepwalking, in my opinion, right? So we're in this crisis mode. We're shutting down things before we have strings attached to money, and I didn't even know that's what that was about Wednesday when I went down there. We have people shoving people off of platforms, and we have, beautiful events, and we have all this emotion, and this person needs to simmer down, and Therese, you need to cut ties from this person. The reality...
Why? That's the question. Why do they want us separated? Why do they want to divide Therese and I? Why do they want to divide you and I? Why do they want to divide you and Therese? Why do they want all these different groups in their own little safe bubble? Let's just sprinkle fairy dust and rainbows and positivity, because that's what's going to get them to stop, okay? I have not threatened anyone. Therese has not threatened anyone. The AG probe is all smoke and mirrors. They have nothing. I know exactly what I said. I won a federal lawsuit against this state. You think I don't know how to speak like a lawyer? You got another thing coming.
So, with that, I want everyone to understand that I'm not responsible. I'm not part of a group. I'm not responsible to anyone but my God. Okay? But the reality is, like I've told a few people that have called me tonight, if 3 years from now I'm sitting in a FEMA camp cell and I've been there by myself for 2 years and I don't know where my family is, am I going to wish that I had been as loud as Frank?
Mm-hmm.
Am
Just
I going to
take the
regret?
shot.
Am I going to be regretting that I don't do more? Because right now my greatest regret is that I didn't get in this game sooner. Okay, I can't go backwards. I can only look at this very moment in time. Okay, and I don't know if we can get the camera to look at this picture that's up on the wall. But that is a family member that survived the Holocaust. That's going in the wrong direction.
Right there.
And that was Grammy Rose that painted that. And she's an accomplished artist, but she survived the Holocaust, and she was a Hungarian Jew, and she was one of the strongest women I have ever met. And if there's no other proof that you can go through trauma and come out strong, it was Grammy Rose. So when Frank gets up there and he gets passionate like he did today, and I take my horn, I've taken the time to invest to kind of get to know him so that he knows I'm not going to silence him. You don't take an animal that's scared. You don't take a foster child who's scared, who's been through trauma, and try to force them to behave. You have to connect. It's the only way you can calm that fight or flight down. So I've been able to connect somewhat with Frank in the short time that I've known him. And so I'm able to say, Frank, look at me, like, breathe here for a second, bud. Let me get your attention. I'm not going to tell you to be quiet. You have every right to have the voice that you have. It's important that all of us understand each other's fight. And
if not now, when?
Right.
When is it appropriate to say FAFO? We do not consent. We will not comply. Are you just saying that? We do not consent. we will not comply because it sounds good and it makes you feel empowered. But what are you going to do when they're knocking on your door to say, you got to take a COVID test? Oh, we need to quarantine you. And then when they quarantine you in a concentration camp, they say, oh, you can't leave until you get the vax.
Or you go and you go down and you're not expecting to even be there, and someone shows you the strings attached, and it means that they could put us in isolation and quarantine. And next thing you know, you're trying to tell all these lobbyists that blood will be on their hands and they're going to need to answer to what they're doing to humanity. And this is the state of New Hampshire, and it needs to stop, and it needs to stop right now.
Right now.
And the next thing I find out, I'm an AG investigation, and I'm on the world news.
Smoke screen.
So, regardless, guys, like, I've prayed for a long time that none of this is actually really happening. But the reality is we all know that it is happening, and it's happening very, very quickly. And it would be easy for them to send a restraint order or do something to retaliate and silence the two of us, or to twist it all.
But that's just us. They can take us out, and other people will step up to the plate. Believe that.
But the reality is, if we all come linked arm in arm, and we say, no, we're going back to our Declaration of Independence, where if the government is not working for the people, it is our duty to rise up and stand for this soil and for this country. And I'm here to tell you that the Lord has told me that we are first in the nation. And when I watched that Australian interview, and someone asked him, what would you tell Americans? And he said, I would tell Americans to stand, and not just stand for America, but stand for the world. It is our opportunity. We were born for such a time as this. And if you read in the Bible, you read that verse, it says, if you stay quiet, I will find somebody else, but you will perish. So I don't take lightly what the Lord shows me. And you know what? I have no regrets about Wednesday. I have no regrets about being seen with this man. My God knows, and if my God needs to put me in jail to do his work, I'm a vessel for him. Paul did his best work in jail. And even on a cross, there was victory. Okay? And they say, if they crucified me, they will crucify you. And let me remind you, in Jesus' day, who did he upset? He upset the political figures of his time. He went into the temple.
Money tables.
Right. He went into the temple. He flipped the tables over. He was livid with the corruption, and that the money was the root of all evils, and the pride, and nobody cared about the people. No one cared about a true heart sacrifice. It was all about making profits and money. All right. And so and then what happened? He was crucified on a cross. So even in death, there is victory for me. I don't fear, because you know what? If that's what God has for me, it's all good. But we have to be courageous. We have to be strong. I asked Frank, do you have hope in this situation? And
Yes.
What did he say? Yes.
And why? I'll tell you why. Because I